Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is The Amateur, where we're here to talk life, hobbies, politics, ideologies, what have you. And on today's episode, we're going to be going into a very hard-hitting topic, as you can see by the title, and going into a conversation that we need to be having seriously, especially since the overturning of Roe v. Wade with Dobbs versus Jackson. So as you may have seen throughout all my previous videos, if you're new here, I am in very advent pro-lifer, anti-abortion Christian. So that is my belief system. And so what I will be offering here, this is going to be the quote unquote extreme defense against abortion, especially you can see from the title. But before we begin this discussion, I would like to say that if you don't believe that there should be any limit or any restriction on abortion, this conversation is not for you. Like you won't gain anything from listening to this conversation or posting a comment in here, because it doesn't matter to you. The nuances of circumstance, they don't matter to you. And I'm not saying that like personally to you, but to your argument, they doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why or how or when a woman got pregnant, only that if she wants to kill her child, she can, because that's her choice. And that is stance for abortion if you don't have any sort of limits or restrictions on that. So like, for me to go on into the nuances of these cases, like it's irrelevant to your point. And so for you to be here on this video, can continue to watch if you want, but there's not going to be any fruitful conversation coming from the comments, just because we share fundamental differences. And I'm not here to go through that back and forth. I've already done it. It's very annoying to say the least. So secondly, there's two other types of restrictions when it does come to abortion, and usually be temporal or a time-based one. So a lot of people will say usually like 24 weeks, which is the normal viability outside of the womb based on current technology, like 24 weeks. Maybe you shouldn't kill the child anymore. You've had 24 weeks to really decide if this is the choice for you. 24 weeks, what is that, 6 months? Is that 6 months? Yeah, it's about 6 months to determine whether you do or don't want your child. So after 6 months of pregnancy, you need to keep your child, or perform an early delivery. But again, if it's just a time-based reason, this conversation also isn't for you, because again, the circumstances are irrelevant to your plight. And if you have a circumstantial and temporal type of restriction on abortion, then this is where we can discuss and talk about why I think you should limit abortion for those cases. And so first thing that I want to preface, for most pro-lifers, I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but at least for myself, for those who are against abortion and pro-lifers, what we are talking about is specifically a mother going out unsolicitedly to request this service upon herself because she no longer wants the child, whether it's for financial reasons, whether it's for relationships, whether it's because she's scared, or whether it's because she doesn't want her body to go through the changes that come with pregnancy and motherhood. She found out that she was pregnant. So it was oopsie. She may have done everything basically right. Maybe she forgot a birth control pill, the condom broke, whatever, but she had an oopsie, is now not prepared for this pregnancy, and scared for her future, scared that she won't be able to succeed while being both a mother and a student or whatever. She wants to go and kill this child. Usually, like, that is the standard case, like 98% of cases of abortion that we are referring to, that should be absolutely denied. And so this gives us into our three extreme cases. And I get extreme doesn't necessarily mean rare, but extreme is the circumstances upon them. So that's usually the threat to the life of the mother. This is what a lot of people will bring up. Incest, and then rape. And rape is including statutory rape. So this is when the child has been raped. This is when the girl is a child who is pregnant. That is all included in rape. And so starting off with the first, usually when it comes to the life of the mother, most pro-lifers and anti-abortionists aren't including those situations in our stance, and it's for the reason why I first explained, because of what we're trying to limit is a woman going out and demanding this procedure on her for no reason at all other than her financial and mental and psychological well-being, because having kids is stressful. Having kids is stressful. And so life of the mother does not fall into that category for us, because like abortion did technically used to be an actual medical procedure, but it was something that the doctor presented to the mother going in to treat both of her mother, treat both the mother and the child as patients. And so this is something where we talk about ectopic pregnancies, and this is for those who aren't unaware of what an ectopic pregnancy is. That's when the child is fertilized and growing outside of the womb, and this can be very, 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 extremely, very damaging. This ruptures blood vessels, this hurts organs, and usually if it's not caught in time and the child grows too big, both the child and mother end up dying. So it's a very serious prenatal condition. However, there have been successes, very, very rare. I think there was a case in 1999 where in UK, it's a miracle of a story. Like, this is a rarity. This is honestly a rarity. But a woman she was found to have triplets. She had triplets, and one of the baby boy was born in the, I want to say he was growing inside the tube, but he was growing outside the womb. So it was an ectopic pregnancy. And so she had the option, I believe, to, terminate the pregnancy completely, where all three children would have passed, but the mother would have survived an early delivery, or have the child keep growing. And what ended up happening, again, it's a miracle that this was able to happen. So it is a rarity. So it's like, I'm saying this like it's an amazing story, but I also don't think that this is very common. But essentially, they allowed the children to grow long enough for them to be delivered early. And what that means is that I think they stopped the pregnancy at like 24 weeks. I think it was 24 weeks. And I'll have to relook at the article before they delivered all the children by C-section. All three of them and the mother lived. And like, it really was a miracle, but it's also like, this was something that the mother chose to do. And so to that point, what doctors what OBGYNs, like, this is their job, to treat both the mother and the child as a patient. And this isn't anything new in medical terms, in medical history, because what doctors are charged to do is conduct triage, which is when you assess all the patients, all their needs, all their injuries, their survivability rate, what's the equipment that we have, what's the professional knowledge that we have. Like, if we don't have a heart surgeon in our hospital and we have some guy coming in with this heart injury, like, you can't treat that patient, or you can't give them the success they need. He needs to be transferred to another hospital, whatever. But they have to practice that triage based off who has the best survivability rate based off all the resources that they have. And they do this all the time in mass casualties, especially if a hospital were to receive a high rate of patient, where they have to be able to look at, okay, they can't save everyone, even though they want to. They want to save everyone, but they can't, and so they have to make those hard decisions. And so in a case of something where it is a threat of life to the mother, like an ectopic pregnancy, or I don't know what else, it's usually the common one. What the doctor should be doing is saying, this is an issue, an abnormality that's going on in your pregnancy, and these are the options that we have for you. One of them might be an abortion based off the survivability rate, and based off where you are in your pregnancy, we think it would be best to not allow the fetus to grow any further. He hasn't made the connections to do blah, 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 what have you. To do an early delivery, so allowing the baby to grow large enough that they can safely remove the child and put him in the NICU and have him grow outside the womb, but the child is still delivered early and safe and sound, and it was the least damage possible. Or thirdly, is to do nothing. or some other care, but allow the mother to make that decision. So again, this is a case where a doctor is presenting the issue to the patient, not the patient demanding the doctor to do something for her, as well as the mother still having that option to look at all her options and choose the one that she think will best fit her own capabilities. That's what she has to do. But that's something, again, like for me and for most pro-lifers, that's separate from the abortion that we are talking of going, again, unsolicited to a doctor saying, perform this procedure on me because I want you to perform this procedure on me, which is like just unethical. And unethical for the doctors to do. Like any doctor who participates in that is just horrible, and that's like a whole other rant. But this brings up a case. This is a recent case. I think her name is Nancy Davis, I believe, a woman in Louisiana. And so her child was found to be growing in her womb without a skull. And I'm showing some pictures. That's not a very pretty picture, but so like children have been born, have gone through all of gestation to be born. Usually for these kids, they don't survive very long outside of the womb, like maybe up to 2 years maximum is how long they last. And so because of that condition of her child, she was seeking an abortion. I think the doctor also recommended an abortion of that child. And I think her complaint was basically that she has to birth her child to bury him. But it's like, and that's a very convoluted situation. Because again, at least for her particular situation, the deformity of her child wasn't necessarily a risk or threat to her life. But it is something where it's just odd to me that you want to rush the death of your child. And it's like, I get it, but it's like, it's just odd, because there are a lot of children who die young, from not necessarily not being born without a skull, but from other things. And it just seems very odd to me that you would just rather rush the process than spend time, whatever time you have. And like, I can't understand this because I'm not going through that situation. I've known a lot of the women in my family have had miscarriages, so it's like I'm not immune to the heartbreak and all the just complications that come with that. But it's just, that whole phrasing is weird to me. But the point of the matter, though, a long rant, long story short, is that in general, threat to the life of the mother is not a consideration for abortion, and what most pro-lifers are pro-abortion mean, so that's fine. On the next case of extreme, when it comes to incest, that is also a very tricky subject, just because incest is legal in a lot of states. Like, it's not wrong to have people who are close in genetic DNA have sex with one another. And I mean, we could talk about, like, historically, incest was fine because it was needed to germinate and populate the human population. But now, since God said, like, hey, don't do that anymore, there's complications with having two people who are too close in genetic DNA mate, because their children often are produced with disabilities. So from my perspective, there's not necessarily an issue that these children have those deformities as far as with why they were born. Because again, we're not talking about rape in this. This is two consenting adults who are similar in genetic DNA, who are essentially family. And so it's like, again, like, it's not illegal in some places. I was like, technically it's fine. But I think it is something that's tricky, where you might want to consider the actual restriction of reproductive rights. Like, if you are going to marry into the same family, then one or both of y'all need to have, like some restrictions made to your reproductive system, so you're not intentionally making these kids who are going to be born with these deformities. It's not very, it's definitely, there definitely needs to be more discussion there as far as with what's pragmatic, what's practical, what makes sense, and what's fair. it's like, I don't have any firm thoughts on that, but I think it's definitely something to consider. For me in particular, I would just say, since the vasectomy is technically reversible, with various degrees of success, that if you're going to contractually enter into a marriage, uh, again, this is concerns only heterosexual couples, that the man needs to have a vasectomy so that they don't get pregnant. And it sounds odd. I know it does sound odd, but that's just what I would say. I don't think that if two people who live in a state where it's illegal to have incest and they have a child, their child shouldn't be aborted for that. Though, I think it's the premise of what I'm trying to get there, because the circumstances of why are conceived aren't don't weigh into whether someone deserves to live, which brings us into our most controversial and most touchy debate of abortion, is which when it comes to rape. So this is one where most, if not a lot of people who would say pro-life are willing to compromise on, or make the exception on. So like all these circumstantial cases, a lot of abortionists, anti-abortionists, pro-lifers, a lot of those people would say, well, as long as you get rid of abortion for everyone else, I'm willing to compromise on allowing abortion for these exceptions. But especially when it comes to rape, and rape is like is the one that most people understand, because this is one where a woman's body is literally being forced because she didn't consent to the action of sex. And mind you, this isn't the government. The government is never forcing anyone to carry a child. The government never forced anyone to carry a child unless the government strapped a woman down and forced semen up her hoo-ha to get her pregnant. The government never forces anyone to be pregnant or to carry a pregnancy or to continue a pregnancy. That's not, the government has no role in that. They can only say, hey, don't kill your child. That's not the same thing as forcing a pregnancy. And to those who don't see that, like, you just, like, is anyone forcing your heart to beat right now? Is the government forcing your heart to beat, to pump blood through your body, to do what your heart is supposed to do? Don't think so. So when you get pregnant, like, the government's not forcing your body to grow a child in your womb the way it's supposed to do when it gets pregnant. Like, it doesn't do that. Okay, but back to the main point and the main topic of rape, is that, again, you shouldn't kill the child for the circumstances of her conception. This gets very tricky, because it is very touchy, and it's a very hard subject, having dealt with a lot of women who have been sexually harassed within my own family. And again, like, this is like, I'm saying this, I'm probably the most conservative voice in my family, the most pro-life. A lot of the rest of my family is not, I wouldn't say that they are pro-life. And so, at least not how I am. And so it's something where we have to stop divorcing pregnancy from sex. Like, it's the same thing. Like, it wasn't just one thing happened and now something completely separated then happened. Like, this is all one action. The pregnancy and the sex, this is all one action. You can't keep treating it as if you can, like, I mean, they tried to divorce the pleasure from the outcome and for the consequences, whether it's mutually done or whether it's one-sided through rape. Like, you can't separate the consequences of pregnancy from the action of sex. And so pregnancy is the consequence of everything that happened from the sex. And so whoever forced themselves, whatever vile man forced himself upon a woman, like, it's wrong, not just because of the act of forcing himself upon a woman, because of everything that could potentially come after that, which includes a pregnancy, which includes a child. And that's why, like, it's why it's so bad. It's not just like, oh, I can't, I'm trying to, like, explain it well enough, but it's just, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to try to treat it as if they were two separate things. So, oh, his, it's just the insertion that was the bad thing. It wasn't everything else that came after it. Like, the pregnancy that came from the rape is also part of the rape, and it's part of why, like, that goes to the rapist and not to the government. That's for sure. And so, yeah, this thing, yeah. So don't separate pregnancy from the act of sex. It's like, it's very much similar to a lot of people who can't separate the taste of food as well. Like, you can't separate that taste from the caloric intake, if that makes any sense. So you need food to gain nurture, to gain energy, to go on through the day. Some people eat just for the taste because the food tastes really, really good, but you can't separate that pleasure that comes from the taste additionally from the caloric intake that you get. And if you're not going to be expending as much energy as you're putting in, you're going to have increased weight gain. And so you can't just try to focus on the good parts of it and ignore everything else. You know what I'm trying to say? So that's like just like another bodily example of like of trying to separate the good parts from the bad parts. You can't. It's all one thing. It's all one thing. And so every time you have sex, pregnancy needs to be the consequence that is like that 100% of the time that you have sex, you'll have a child. That's how seriously you need to take the action of sex. I mean, like, I get that it's not every time. It's actually pretty hard to get pregnant, surprisingly. But the pregnancy is the full consequences of sex. And if you do have sex and you don't have a pregnancy, you should just count yourself lucky that you missed the window of opportunity. Or I won't say the window of opportunity, but you missed that window of fertilization that avoided the pregnancy. But that doesn't, like, the pregnancy is supposed to happen from sexual reproduction. Reproduction, when you reproduce a child from sexual reproduction, like, that is the desired outcome of sexual reproduction. Like, I don't know how that gets past a lot of people's brains. And so this speaks into the special capability of women. Women are the people who have uteruses. There's no other, like, you can be a woman without a uterus because you removed it or it was a biological anomaly, but all women have uteruses, okay? And so that's a special consideration that women need to have for with whom they choose to have sex with. And so especially when that's taken away from them because of rape, that's a big deal, because we have that responsibility and because it's one that shouldn't be taken for granted. It shouldn't be taken for granted, and we do a lot. We do a lot in this society. Take for granted that women are responsible for bringing life into this world, for carrying the first stages of anyone who walked into this world's life. Like, that's a big responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And when that's violated, like, that needs to be taken seriously. And so when a child is born from rape, that creates two victims. It creates two victims. It creates two victims. There's not just the mother involved now, which is, like, I don't get why we don't understand that. There's two people now, and she has to face the full consequences of that because of one man's selfish actions. Like, that's a serious thing. You have to take life at all stages very seriously. Like, it's important, it matters, and you have to treat it like it matters. You can't just discard life on a whim. Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And so there's two potential outcomes for allowing abortion for a victim of rape. And one would be that because of the tricky nature of court cases, that you would have to, if court cases take a long time in order to prove someone guilty of a crime, because you are innocent until proven guilty, and obviously a child in the womb is one piece of evidence, but you have to be able to prove someone guilty of rape in order to receive the said abortion. But since court cases take so long, by the time that a court case may finish, the child may have already been born. And so it would be something where that route of option won't work, to actually go through judicial procedures. And so then you would have to say that you've been raped and then get an abortion. But again, like, if you're going to do that, you need to be able to press charges and bring whomever was the rapist through court cases. And I think that's, again, like, a more reasonable compromise. I still really don't like it, but it'd be something where a woman can file or press charges for rape, receive whatever abortion it is that she does, go through the trial process. But and this is something as well, like, I think for me, it's like, if you are convicted of rape and there's no child that's been involved, that you need to be, like, publicly castrated. And I think that's kind of the case for, like, sex offenders. But I also do think that if you bring a child into this world from rape, that you receive the death penalty. And we don't like talking about the death penalty. And I used to be, I think I said in previous videos, I used to be very much against capital punishment, but, like, some things, like, some serious action requires serious punishment, and that is what it is. Michael Knowles says that he doesn't believe the death penalty for rape should be considered because it might incentivize killing, the even further action. But, like, for me, that doesn't make sense, just because either way, like, if you're murdering, like, death penalty for murderers too, like, either way, this guy needs to die. Either way, this guy needs to die. If you're going to rape someone and then murder her, like, that, you can't be active in society, and you murdered her just so that you can avoid the death penalty, or just, I don't get that. So I think the death penalty, especially for someone who brings a child into, forces a pregnancy upon a woman from rape, death penalty. I think that. So in the case, again, that if a woman were to falsely accuse, like, she receives her abortion because she filed for rape, found out that she falsely accused a man of rape just so she can get her abortion, that she should also receive the death penalty for, one, trying to kill another man, because if we have the death penalty be the result of a pregnancy, to kill another man just so she could kill her own, like, she needs the death penalty too. Obviously, that's not the system that we live in, so this is, like, my ideal world. I don't know how ideal is ideal, but that's how I envision it. So those are this is what I'm saying would happen if abortion were made exception for cases of rape, but I don't think that it should be. And especially, I didn't say this before, but I think also especially if it's an adult to a child. Like, I think there's a case saying about forcing a 10-year-old to carry pregnancy. If there is a man who's raping a child, like, he also deserves the death penalty. Like, that's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. I don't know. I think we go too soft on some of the crimes that are committed in society. But as with instances of incest where the circumstance of conception does not determine value, does not determine worth, and that is still another human being, I don't believe that abortion should be an option. I've worked with children of rape. I've worked with children conceived from rape. I've worked with a child who was a failed abortion, and it's just heart-wrenching. I think I was just watching something on the news, and I just made an offhand comment. I was just like, it's something that was, like, against abortion. He's like, yeah. He's like, actually, I'm a survivor of abortion. Like, I was supposed to have been aborted, and he's like, I enjoy my life. It's like, I don't know why these people want me dead. It's just like, people are so important. Okay, you can't, and it starts at conception. It starts at conception. For all of us. Do we not get that? Like, I have these conversations, and it just, like, it hurts my heart that they don't think that from the moment that they came into this world, that they made a difference, that they mattered, that they're important, and that their life was worth living and worth keeping, you know? So this is something where, as well, I don't think the option should be abortion, but I do think that as a society we could offer early delivery, as I mentioned before, for those who had a child conceived from rape. And this would be something where, especially as technology advances, I think as early as 21 weeks now, that they're able to successfully keep a child alive in the NICU after an early delivery. And so this is breaking news. I want to say the typical gestation for a pregnancy is like 40 weeks. So this is almost less than half of that gestation time. And this is what I think, if someone has a pregnancy of rape, that they only have to do, again, those 21 weeks of pregnancy, offered early delivery. I don't mind if my taxpayer dollars go to that, to support that, the hospital fund or the bill of providing an early delivery for a child, and that would do the least amount of damage to her body and all the changes that it was forced to go through. And again, like, the mother still has the opportunity or the option to raise her child if she so chooses, or if she would like to give her child up for adoption, that their family is waiting and ready and willing to adopt her child. And so, like, no one, if you don't think that you can raise a child, no one is going to, I mean, people will, because people will get mad at you for anything you do, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But like, for most people, it's just like, if you recognize in yourself that you're not capable, willing, or able to raise or take care of a child, find a family that will or can, and give your child up for adoption, because, like, it's going to be better for your child, you know? And, like, I get that it's hard. Like, I could never with my own child. I could never. I could never. So I get that it's a very difficult decision for some to even just do that. Like a lot of women would say they would rather abort their child than have to give their child up, which, like, again, doesn't make any sense. But I get that it's a difficult decision. But for me, in my case, like, that's the only option that's available for instances of rape, is will offer early delivery of your child. And that's not killing your child. That's going to make sure that that child still remains alive, or the least amount of damage is inflicted on your body at no cost. And this is just because killing the child doesn't reverse the rape. And this is what's most important. It doesn't stop the rape from having ever happened. It doesn't change the history, doesn't change the fact. What is done, and it's happened, and you can't change that. And killing a child doesn't change that. It just further victimizes the child. It further victimizes the mother, because a lot of women, regardless of what you might hear about shedding your abortion, they go through a lot of trauma from just losing a child or having their child gone. A lot of women experience a lot of regret, depression, just loss. It's just like, it's a very unnatural thing. It's very unnatural. It's just so, like, we are the only species that actively goes against our offspring, our children. I wouldn't say we're the only ones. At least in mammalian species, I want to say, I don't know. There's some that might eat their kids. I don't freaking know. But you don't see dogs and pregnant dogs throwing themselves down the stairs to make sure that their puppies don't get to be born. I don't see birds smashing their eggs that have been fertilized, that they've been sitting on. You just don't see that. But in humans, it's a right. Doesn't make sense. And so this also brings us, and this is going to sound very, very disgusting and horrible, because I can see it. I'm very self-aware of the words that I'm saying and how it can be perceived based off the different perspectives that you have. Like, I get it. It's going to sound very horrible, but especially when it comes to those who are 14 years and younger, and them having to carry a pregnancy, like, it's not it's not a situation, it's just not a fun situation. The whole situation should never have occurred, because you need to treat children with respect, and you don't get to force yourself on children. But it's something where if a child has reached that age of maturity, if a little girl has reached that age of biological maturity where you can rape her and she becomes pregnant, that she has those early deliveries, and it's going to sound insensitive, but it's also recognizing, historically speaking, like 14 used to be the ripe age for pregnancy. I think now, especially as our culture has aged and matured, that we realize that 14 is a little bit young to be entering into sacred acts, as far as with the notion that you're supposed to be married before you have sex, and being married at 14, and just the way that society has changed and shifted. But a 14-year-old's body is capable. 10-year-old, again, like I'm not convinced that that her life would be in danger. And I know that sounds very harsh and very insensitive, but I'm not convinced that between the 10-year-old and 14-year-old, that if they reach that age of biological maturity, that her body would be able to sustain herself. I still do think, again, early delivery for the child, like I think that's just a horrible situation for anyone to have to go through that. But like, even like, and I say this not as if it's a boast or like it's a good thing. Like, these things we need to be prevented. We need to punish the men that are responsible for this. But even at 5 years old, I believe, is the youngest pregnancy, because she had a hormone deficiency where she started her period very early. And this is something where you want puberty blockers for children, because it's an actual biological abnormality for her to have begun puberty at like age 3, and that's not good for her because it's going to stunt her later in life. Anyway, there was a 5-year-old, I believe somewhere in South America, who was raped, and her family found out that she was pregnant. And at first they thought it was a tumor, but it turned out it was another baby. So this is a 5-year-old having another child, and like I think they performed C-section on the child, but both the child and her son, which was only, again, 5 years younger than she was, lived. And this is, again, before technology had gotten so advanced as we have it now. But the point, though, is just to understand that the body is capable of adjusting and growing. Not that it's a good thing for her to have been in that situation to begin with, but that, the body can adapt. And if you're able to treat life sacredly, across all cases and instances, that, again, if in the case that a young little girl was raped, that it's not going to be the government forcing her to have a child. And one story that I really like, is from, I think, Kathy Bennett. I made a video on her previously, but she made a video telling her story of her mother, who was 11 at the time that Kathy Bennett was. I hope I'm saying her name right. Yeah, Kathy, because I think I'm thinking of Caitlin Bennett too. But she explains her story so well. I definitely cried, like, listening to it. It's just it's heart-wrenching. But I'm just gonna go ahead and play a couple of scenes so you can just have her explain for herself.
I grew up in southern Alabama, very rural, one-stop sign town called Nichburg. Getting ready to go to college, I decided to go into the Army Reserves. But I had to go get my birth certificate, mainly because the name was different. The name I had always grown up with was Nelson, but then come to find out there was something completely different on my birth certificate. Clearly, I could have done the math and realized just how young my mother was when she gave birth to me, but it was never something that truly resonated with me until I looked at my birth certificate for the very first time and just kind of studied it. Her gender, they called her a Negro girl, and that was the first thing I saw, and it just kind of grabbed my heart. But then I saw her age, and she was 12. And that just really struck a chord in me because I realized just how young. my mother was when something so horrible had visited upon her. Even to this day, it's a very hard word to say, but my mother was raped, given her young age at 11 years old, my father being 21.
They was hurt. We was all devastated. But my mother said, you're pregnant, so we're going to get through this. And she helped me get through it. I don't want to use the word choice. She was going to be born. I didn't have a choice to say, you're going to live, or I'm going to abort you. That wasn't a choice for me. And I thank God it wasn't a choice for me.
As a child, I knew no difference. I was loved, and I felt loved. It gave me a greater appreciation for my mother. It helped me to forgive a lot of the mistakes someone at that age, having gone through such trauma, would have made in their own parenting. But it definitely made me become very adamant about the sanctity of life, of all life, regardless of their conception, regardless of how they arrived, that I am valuable, I'm worthy, and my life has purpose. Before the foundation of the world, God saw me and he decided that I would be. And he said in his word that not only did I see you, but I called you, I predestined you. And so as a Christian, I believe in the value of life, that when I was in my mother's womb, he was knitting me together. Even among Christians, even among staunch conservatives, an exception to the rule of being pro-life for many is in the case of rape. And yet my life has value. From me has come two very beautiful and charming and smart kids, married to a wonderful husband. We've made a life for ourselves, and none of this would have happened if the exception to the rule had applied.
Regardless of how old you are and how the child was conceived, that child deserved a chance. And if I had made that choice, where would I be at right now without my daughter?
The hardest struggle for my mother, the hardest thing for her to overcome, I think, is just the effects of the trauma itself. And that is why I think it's so important to help people understand that the trauma has already been inflicted. The child should not be inflicted with the consequences that squarely belongs on the one who inflicted the trauma. We have to be able to see the difference. Aborting me would not have eased the trauma that my mother suffered. Aborting me would not have allowed me to be in a place today where I can now take care of my mother.
It's just amazing to see them grow up. Regardless of how my life started out, I'm blessed.
I'm not left with bitterness. I'm left with overwhelming sense of gratitude. That not only did God see value in my life, but that my family saw value in my life. I'm very grateful for that. I'm eternally grateful that they chose to allow me to be born.
And it's a heart-wrenching story, and like I tear up just thinking about it, because like it's definitely not fair for any little girl to have to go through that situation, and it's it's stressful for the entire family, but her life matters. Even if you are conceived and raped, that little girl's life matters. Both of their lives matter, and you can't just treat children like they're commodities to be tossed away just because they exist. You have to be able to treat it in its holistic form. Like, these are two, like in the case of a mother and pregnant with her child, like, these are now two beings that we have to take care of and make sure that both of their best interests are kept in mind. And so for the case of Nancy Davis, for me personally, like if the doctors found it feasible, based off the knowledge, based off the history, to have an abortion, I do think that should have been available for her. But I personally wouldn't have if I had to have that situation. If the child was still growing, and spend whatever 2 minutes, 3 minutes with my child outside the womb before I did have to bury my child. Life of the mother, though, again, if the doctor is presenting the abortion as a viable cause based off certain documents presented, and evidence, like this is an actual issue, life of the mother it's not the same abortion case that we're talking. Incest, two consensual adults, again, the way that a child is conceived isn't something that means that they need to die. It's not their fault for sure, and maybe again looking into regulations against those who are in incestual relationships, whether that's I'm sure feminists would go on a field day with saying that the men needs to have a vasectomy if they're going to be in a contractual incestual relationship. And then for the cases of rape, no abortion, but providing early delivery as soon as is medically possible for those victims. And then if they so choose to have that early delivery, like if they don't want early delivery, they don't have to have it, but that is going to be an option for them. So what I'll finish off and close off on is that the government's never forced a pregnancy. It never has. It doesn't force pregnancy. That's only that charge can only be given to the rapist, and you can't stop blaming the government for anything like that. That needs to go squarely on the person who actually did the raping, whatever evil vile man decided to force his will upon someone else. And that's what forced the pregnancy, not the government. And so essentially with abortions, if we're going to have it in its full terms, like if we're going to go through the medical route, like we're talking about the life of the mother, that it's permitted obviously, but it needs to have that medical documentation to support to support that decision, support why that was given as an option for the doctor. Because like a lot of abortion cases fall squarely on the doctor and their violation of the Hippocratic Oath, which one says that they'll do the least harm possible. Like, I don't get how any doctor can call themselves a doctor while performing abortions. Like, you shouldn't be able to practice medicine that's meant to take care of lives and bring forth life. Like, there's a whole branch of OBGYN, that's a whole field of doctors dedicated strictly to mothers and their child, and to act like that's not significant or relevant is just ridiculous for the medical community. So I do think more onus needs to be going on doctors and their violation of the Hippocratic Oath. Like the Hippocratic Oath isn't a law technically, but it is part of the ethics and integrity of the medicine fields. Like, how can anyone trust a doctor to do what's best for them if they're going to perform such function? I mean, this goes for abortion, this goes for transgender surgeries. It's just for the money and not for the actual patient's healthcare and well-being. And the only other compromise, I guess I would say if we started moving towards this as a country, would be abortion before viability, first 12 weeks before a trial is confirmed, but death penalty if found falsely accusing someone else of rape just so you can have an abortion. But again, like overall though, my full thoughts, because we live in a society where compromise has gotten less and less reachable. But my whole thought though is that I'm against abortion, and I've said why. I know my views are a little bit extreme for some, but I think it's a conversation that we need to have, and I'm willing to have that conversation. So those are my thoughts on those extreme cases of abortion. And I don't speak for the Christian community, though I am Christian. I don't speak for all the pro-lifers. I don't speak for all those against abortion. But that's why I don't believe abortion should happen in those cases. Again, if we don't share the principles that life is at least important, then we're not going to have that much fruitful conversation. But it's YouTube and free speech, so like drop a comment. I mean, the comments are open. We can have that discussion. And I'm just an amateur, so it is what it is. But make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.